This episode is sponsored by my friend Tracy and my friend Emily, who are both sponsoring 2 episodes a month on the Life Shift podcast Patreon feed. Basically, that is a member support, and that's just helping to contribute to the production costs and anything that I need to keep the show going. As you know, I do all of this myself, and so sometimes I order software or hardware to make the show better than it is the day before. And so if you want to directly support the show, please reach out to me or go to patreon.com/the Life Shift podcast, and you can find out all the information there. Thank you so much for your support. And without further ado, here's the intro to the episode.
So I woke up, no lie, looked at my phone, and I was like, and I started scrolling and I couldn't see, right? And so I was like, it's happening. Like the one thing that he said wouldn't happen is happening, and I just started freaking out. And it was just very, very dramatic, traumatic, dramatic, all the things.
Today's guest is Taris Marie. She is, in my opinion, a woman of resilience, creativity, and truly unyielding strength. In this episode, Taris shares her journey from her dream career in fashion to facing the challenges brought by Stargardt's disease, which is an inherited condition that affected her vision. Despite these hurdles, Taris has embraced her journey with, I think, courage that's nothing short of inspiring. Her story weaves in themes of adaptability, her faith, one major spiritual moment, and creative expression as she transitions from this successful career in fashion to becoming a published author of women's crime novels. Throughout the conversation, Taris's faith and creative spirit are top of mind, and she shares how they guided her through her life shifts. It is both of our hopes that this episode helps you feel less alone in your journey when challenges get in the way of your dreams, or when they're actually guiding you in a new direction. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Taris Marie. I'm Matt Gilhooly, and this is The Life Shift, candid conversations about the pivotal moments that have changed lives forever. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Life Shift podcast. I am here with Taris. Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for joining today. The Life Shift podcast is like this wonderful journey that I just never expected for myself. And you're the 150th person that I've been able to interview on this show. And I'm just so blessed and
Congrats.
yeah, well, thank you. It has been quite a journey. And just for anyone listening, before we get into your story, the Life Shift podcast exists because when I was 8 years old, my mom was killed in a motorcycle accident. And at that moment in my life, when my dad sat me down and told me, everything in my life shifted from what it was going to be to what it became. Because my parents were divorced, we lived in different states. I lived with my mom full time. Everything changed. And so growing up, I didn't really have the resources, or I guess maybe the time period. People weren't talking about mental health or grief, and I was a kid and people thought kids bounce back and, all those things that come along with losing someone. And I was like, do other people have this a line in the sand kind of moment in which everything changes? And, as a grown up now, I realize that people have lots of those. They have different ones and how they change them. And I've just had this wonderful experience on the Life Shift podcast of talking to people like you about these moments and how, as an individual, these moments can change us. Either that's in a good way or a bad way. And so, thank you again for just wanting to share your story in this way.
Thank you for having me.
It is going to be a good conversation. I think some of your story is something that maybe people can't relate to directly, but I know for a fact that parts of how you felt and the things that came around that people will be able to completely relate to, because it turns out as humans we have a lot of the same kind of feelings about different moments in our lives. So I'm excited to hear your story and what you've done with your pivotal moment. Before we do that, though, maybe you can tell us a little bit about who you are in 2024 without giving away too much.
Okay. So my name is Taris Marie. I am a published author and I write right now women's crime novels. And I'm a wife and a mother of two.
Maybe you can, and this is up to you where you take us, but maybe you can kind of paint the picture of who Terrace was, before this life shifting moment that really changed everything for you, and we'll go from there.
Okay. I'm a Midwestern girl, actually. Originally, I'm from Gary, Indiana. I moved to Houston, Texas about 11 years ago. Prior to that, I lived in Dallas for a year and I lived in Atlanta, Georgia. And career wise, I had my dream career, which was in fashion. I started off as an assistant buyer and I worked in the fashion industry for 15 years. I did different things like merchandising, buying. I was a merchandise planner. And so I had, as far as my career goes, I achieved them. And it was something that I was always interested in. And as a young girl, I used to draw little sketches and stuff like that. So it was, I would say, a dream job for me. And so I was doing that. And then also, as I said earlier, I'm married. So I had my husband, I had my two children. And so that was my life.
You were checking all the boxes. Were you kind of like feeling like you were doing the thing?
That's it. I was making the money I wanted to make. I was, had the career that I wanted. And I felt like I was accomplishing everything that I had in my mind of what my life was going to be like. And that's pretty much now there were other things that happened prior to that, but right before my pivotal moment, that is what was going on in my life. So
Well, growing up, were you said like you had dreamed of this like since you were like 6 years old or something like that, drawing things, and then you were making the life happen that you had always dreamed of. Were you always like a go getter and someone that like achievement was a thing?
yes, yes. So I was raised by my grandparents, and my grandfather and my grandmother both were readers. They loved to read. And they exposed me to the arts. So, my grandfather loved musicals. And so I love musicals now. And so I kind of had this balanced life, if that makes sense, when it comes to education as well as the arts. And so I used to do a lot of things like I mentioned earlier. I used to draw little sketches, like fashion sketches. I also used to like create movies. And I mean, I was just a child with a big imagination. But I always had, like I said, this balance between business and my artistic world. So,
So it wasn't always like chase the next dream, get the
right,
next achievement. It was like you were living like the dream, but also comfortable in the dream and not because a lot of the people I talk to, even myself, my example is probably more trauma induced of like having to achieve so that people like accepted or didn't abandon me in that moment. But a lot of people I talked to, it was like, they achieved something and they didn't take the time to sit in it and enjoy it. It was more like, what can I do next? What can I do next? Were you someone that sat in the moment and celebrated yourself and gave yourself your flowers, or was it always on to the next level for you?
I would say it was actually always on to the next level. I want to make sure that, when I say like my grandparents raised me, my mom left when I was 6 years old. And so when she left, then I was then with my grandparents and they raised me. But I did not come from the perfect, or I don't want to, stereotypical upbringing, if that makes sense. And I did have, certain issues and certain things that I did have to overcome as a young child. But I feel that my grandparents did a really good job of making sure that they provided a home for me that gave me the foundation that I needed in order to achieve some of the things. Even though we did not have a lot of money, I wanted to be a dancer also. So, like you were saying, dream chaser. And I remember my grandmother took me to the secondhand stores, what we called it, and that's where I got some tap shoes. And then my grandfather was showing me old movies like Stormy Weather and the Nicholas Brothers and Gregory Hines. And he's like, they taught themselves how to tap dance. You could teach yourself. So I used to be down in the basement trying to teach myself how to dance, so I tried to make the best of my life of what I had at the moment. That's something that has always been a part of me, I would say, even now, and I'll get to my pivotal moment in a second. But anytime something would come at me, I would be able to take it and turn it around and find a positive in it and try to grow from it. Even as a child, I would say, and my faith kept me grounded in that, I would say.
Is that something that came from your grandparents as well?
Actually, my faith and going to church came from my aunts. So where I lived, I grew up where my cousins lived down the street. I grew up in a neighborhood with a bunch of kids, and I used to go outside, ride my bike, do all the things. And so my Aunt Shirley, would pick me up with my cousins, and then would take me to church, and that's where I got my foundation from as far as spiritually.
And then your grandparents gave you like this safety. It almost seems like they made like a safe space for you to explore and dream and do the things that you wanted. I mean, I'm making assumptions here, but
No,
is that
that's very
true?
true. That's very
Because
true.
I feel like a lot of kids would not be able to find like the silver lining or the beauty in the madness and those kind of things if they didn't feel safe. So it
Right.
sounds like you had a space where like, hey, you want to do this? Try it, like
Absolutely.
whereas a lot of people are like, or I felt very much like these were my only roads to go. Like you have to go to business school, you have to do this, you have to do this. That's it. Like I didn't have I and maybe I did, but I didn't feel the space in which I could explore those things in a safe way because would it lead to a good job? Would it do, like those kind of things. And so
Now you just hit the hell, not the hell, but you hit the nail on the head. Now, that was my childhood. Now, as I got older, that's when my grandparents say, okay, all of that was cute. Now it's time for you to hone in. What are you going to do? All that other stuff is a hobby. And when I went to college, I guess that could be my first moment. I went to Florida A&M University and I was on a journalism scholarship, and still writing didn't hit me.
yeah.
It was, and so anyway, I went to a symposium and they were showing the salaries of journalism majors versus a business major. And so I was like, I cannot graduate from college making that money. I need to get into the business school. And I called my grandmother. I said, oh my God, they just showed the average salary coming out of college for the School of Journalism, and it was 13 or $15,000, something like this. You like, oh hell no, you got to find something else. And so I was like, okay, so then I had to pivot, right? And so that's when I looked up Indiana University. They had a 98% placement rate for minorities at the time through the Kelly School of Business. And so I always made good grades. Like I told you, I always had a balance between the arts and the business. And so I said, for long term, for my to get the salary that I wanted, then I need to make sure that I, build that foundation in college through the business school. So my grandmother definitely, so I changed my whole, it changed, I did not, I walked away from my scholarship, went to Indiana University, got accepted into the Kelly School of Business, which I do not regret. Okay. But that is where I first did my first pivot.
It's interesting too because you said you had this balance between art and would you say art and business? But
Yes.
also like you had this balance between dreams and reality
Right.
and that you kind of like married too at the same time in the sense of like, yeah, it's great to dream, but also you have to live and you have to be able to do the things that you want to do that involve the dreams. And so it's like you have this nice balance of all these things. And like I'm very jealous in a way. That's very good of you to
Please don't
have.
be. Because listen, what I instill in my children now is when I went to my grandmother, and it's fine the way everything worked out,
Of course.
but I told her what the average salary was, right? But it could have been, you've been doing this all your life, or don't think in terms of average. You know what I mean? Like, where's your
Yeah.
passion? And so that is a conversation. I didn't have anyone talking to me in that way. It was more so about, okay, you got to make money, period. And I knew I had to make money, so it was more about me but like you said, I still was able to find a career where I was making the money that I wanted, and I stepped away from the arts, not so much in college because I still was in plays and did things like that, but my focus was on my career and making money. And that's where what happened when I graduated from college. And I told you I started off an assistant buyer program, and I, continued that until I hit the bathroom floor.
Well, tell me, that must be a moment.
Okay, so before I hit the bathroom floor, when I had it was actually when I had my son, I found out I had a disease called Stargardt's disease. And what happened was my vision was starting to be off. And they tell you when you have a child that it can affect your vision. But after a year went by and things were getting really distorted, I was like, this doesn't feel right. Right. And so long story short, I went to a retina specialist and I got tested and I found out I had an inherited disease called Stargardt's disease, which takes away your central vision. It keeps your peripheral intact, but you lose, whatever it is that you're looking directly at. And so, and it is progressive. And so at the time when I was diagnosed, I still had, most of my vision in both eyes. The doctor at that time was preparing me by first of all, because I just broke down crying.
Of
The
course, yeah, it's
go-getter in
scary.
me, was like, okay, so when he told me what my diagnosis was, I'm like, okay, so what surgery do I need?
How do we fix this?
Yeah, what and I was like, can I get some new eyeballs? Like what do I need to do to get new eyeballs? Like what is it? And so he's like, there's nothing you can do. Like it's part of your DNA and no matter what eyes you get, it's going to affect,
Interesting.
yeah.
Is it fairly common, or is it
It's
something
very
that's pretty
rare.
rare?
It's very
Okay.
rare. Both parents have to have it or at least have the gene. My mother does not have it at all, and I don't know my father. So I'm not for sure if he, is walking around with it or not. But as a fact, he either is a carrier or he has it. And my mother is a carrier because she doesn't have star guards where you can, see it. So yeah, it was mind blowing. But at the time when I was diagnosed, I still was able to see, like I still had most of my vision. So it didn't really affect me. And so the doctor handed me a Sherlock Holmes magnifying glass and was like, "All right, so this is going to be your future. You better learn Braille." And I was like, "What?" Like, it was very traumatic.
That's not very good bedside manner we got there.
So, oh my, so
Yeah,
anyway, fast forward. Oh, and then I said, "Am I going to be able to wake up and not be able to read my text messages?" I remember specifically asking that question. Like, no, it doesn't work like that. It worked
it
like
sounds
that for
like,
me.
yeah. Oh, really? It was like an overnight.
So I woke up, no lie, looked at my phone, and I was like, and I started scrolling and I couldn't see, right? And so I was like, it's happening. Like the one thing that he said wouldn't happen is happening, and I just started freaking out and it was just very, very traumatic, dramatic, all the things. And
Yeah, I can't
so
imagine. Was it up to that moment, though? Did you notice that things were progressing, or
yes.
okay,
So
okay.
things were progressing, but as I said, I still had acuity in both eyes to where I still was able to drive. I was still able to do those things. And like so what happened is which is also very rare, that one little central vision spot where I was able to see, it just like disappeared. And so then, my central vision just went blah, you know. And so I had a much better doctor at that time. And so he had told me that, well, we knew this was going to come. And so he referred me to a low vision specialist. I had to call my job and was like, you're not going to believe this, but I woke up, I couldn't read my text message, so it was just a whole situation.
Were they aware, or was that something that, like, you had given anyone notice about that?
Yeah, they knew
Okay.
because once I was kind of like letting them know, I had worked for this company for a while, and so I had told them when things were going on because we were all, close to what was happening. So I was like, "You're not gonna believe this! Like my whole like I can't read my text messages, and So they were like, "Well, do what you got to do, whatever." So I took some time off. I got devices. I learned how to see through these devices. And so I was like, yeah, grooving, I'm back. I went back to work. I had these big giant screens and, we made all these accommodations. What happened was when I got to my job, I will say, and this is before remote working remote was part of our culture. Not most of the companies still weren't doing remote. I couldn't drive at night, of course. I had got these bioptics that allowed me to do driving, not highway driving. I couldn't do nighttime driving and I had limitations on, screen time and things like that. just to make a long story short, when I got back to work, it wasn't very well received.
Because of the accommodations, or did you feel like you were like the old version of you, like working and doing the things that you were doing, or did you also notice that you weren't able to do some of the functions
Well,
that you needed to?
I would say that when you're working with numbers and you have all these different spreadsheets, right? When you're giving a presentation and you're saying, okay, here's the number, this is my forecast. And I would stay up late at night and prepare everything. And then they would say, okay, well, tell me what it was last year, week two, day 4 and 5. Well, for someone who has a vision impairment, it's going to take me, so I'm standing in front of all these people and then my anxiety starts to get up and I'm like, trying to figure it out. Then they're, oh, people start doing that. And so it created this unsafe culture for me. And I ended up, it was very, so that was starting my slow descent, right? Emotionally, because I came back ready to rock and roll. And then when I didn't get the response that I thought I was going to get, and I started feeling myself start to descend. So I went on disability.
What does that do to your psyche?
No, well, I was told that I couldn't do the job. And then I asked, well, what can I do? And they were like, well, you can't even work in the mailroom because you can't see the mail. So it was really a very traumatic,
Yeah, does that
traumatic.
I mean, does that, like, break you? Because it sounds like you were pretty confident and
I was
productive.
going into it, but I'm telling you, once it got to that moment, I was almost at rock bottom. Almost
So
at
it
rock
breaks you
bottom.
to a point of, like, you don't like, soul searching, essentially. Who am I? What
Who
value do
am
I
I? What
bring?
am I?
Like,
So
mm,
what does this look like? Like what if I'm not good enough to work in the mailroom? What am I good in? Like what can I do? And these are all the questions I was asking myself. And in the meantime, I'm still a wife. I'm a mom. I have these two small children, and so I'm like, well, let me try the housewife and try to do that. And I tried that, and it wasn't quite me. And as I started to, like you said, it's just started to go downhill with my mind. I felt broken inside. Things that I used to could see, I can no longer see. I start looking instead of thinking about looking at things from a positive. I just started seeing so many things, like what I couldn't do.
I
And
think it's hard
so,
not to be that way. I would imagine that
yeah,
a lot of people would feel that way.
yeah. And so I went down to the floor and I remember I was on the bathroom floor and I was like, what's my purpose? Like, and I just didn't feel like I was even worthy to be here, to be honest. And so I was like, this is it. Like maybe that's just it. And that's when I heard God say, get up, truly. And so I was like, okay. And so I got up, I looked in the mirror. I didn't recognize myself at all. I was like, dirty hair, because when you're depressed,
You don't take care of yourself.
you don't. And I didn't recognize, I truly didn't. And so the first thing I did when I was like, all right, I heard God tell me to get up, let me shower. So I just went and kind of like cleansed, washed my hair. And then I heard God say, write a book. And so I was like, okay. And before that, let me tell you what I said. I said, God, tell me what you want me to do and I will do it. Not only will I not get on that floor, I will help as many people as I can to not get on that floor. And then he said, write a book.
Have you was this, like, your first experience in which you, like, actually heard of a voice of God of telling you, like, or helping you along, or was this something that, like, you've always kind of communed in that way and always heard stuff?
Mm-mm. So
This was
I
the first.
honestly, I had been going to church since I was a little girl, and I thought that hearing the voice of God was only for pastors and things like that. So I did not know that I would even be in a position to be able to hear a voice. You know what I mean? I don't know. I thought it was just for pastors because I would hear it at church, God said, or, something like that. So when I heard that voice and it was clear as day, and then when I heard, write a book, I said, okay, that's it. I washed my hair and I said, I'm going to write a book.
Was this ever something on your list? This is,
Was
like,
not on my
something
list,
totally
but
brand new.
but what I will say is when I went back to go look in my garage and I looked at some of my old like things from when I was a
Mhm.
little girl.
Yeah.
I found in middle school a book called From My Heart, Mind, Body, and Soul by Taris Marie Rochelle Smith. That was my name. So that's what I saw. And I was like,
Oh,
oh my God. And I did not remember writing that, right? So it was like, this book is about blah, blah, blah. So it was like I was trying to get, I guess it was something in me that I didn't even realize that was there. And then I told you I had a journalism scholarship to go to Florida A&M University. And so I guess it was just something I was keeping buried that I just didn't, bring to life, but I sure heard it when I was in the shower. So when I heard that, I'm approaching 40 and I'm like, all right. So I sit in front of my computer in front of this blank piece of paper, or, I got a big old screen that's like this big. And so I'm like looking at it, I'm like, got my magnification on like 800. So like,
you're like, "What do I do?"
what do I do? Because
Yeah,
I told you my career and everything
right.
was in business. And so
And fashion, it's like, what do like, yeah, like, how he could have at least told you what kind of book to write.
And so let me tell you about the conflict, right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, does this mean I'm supposed to write Christian literature? Like, I
Mm,
don't know.
I
You know
could
what I
see
mean? So
that, yeah.
I didn't quite know.
Or your story. I would imagine a lot of people would feel that compelled to tell your story.
But you know what I did? I just opened my mind. And that's when I started hearing these characters talk to me. And so then they were like, going on these adventures and doing all these things. And a lot of them come from broken places. And so I just started writing and literally I haven't stopped. That was Juneteenth 2020. I write every single day. I published my first
What a
novel
great
last
day to
year.
start too.
Oh, and I didn't even realize it was Juneteenth because
Juneteenth,
this
yeah,
was COVID, right?
right.
This was during COVID, during everybody was on lockdown. And so my air conditioner wasn't working in the house. It was just crazy, right? And then I'm like super sweaty and hot. And so I'm like, waiting on God to tell me what to do. And so then I was like, you know what, this is silly. Like, I don't know. And so then I was like, okay, Google, play Beyonce. I just wanted to hear some Beyonce to see what was
Yeah,
going
who
to happen.
doesn't?
And then the song that came on was Black Parade. And so she had released that on Juneteenth. So that's when, I said, okay, well, God's going to use Beyonce to talk to me. Then let me go ahead and then I started moving my fingers and looking at my big screen. And like I said, I started writing and I just have not stopped. And I write women's crime of all things.
Fiction?
I write fiction novels, yes, and love it.
That's awesome.
I love what I
Do you
do.
ever think that, like, maybe, like, this was just pushed down because you had your sight, you had your hear you had all the things so you could kind of go after all those things in your childhood that you love to do, and this was just,
Mhm.
like, something you could do, and now that you had some limitations in some of the things that you were doing, now you are able to hear the voices of your characters and the other things because
You gotta speak it. That is exactly and that's why I said, "You know what? So as I journeyed through, especially with writing, I became more, and even before the writing, let me just rewind a little bit. I was exploring, trying to figure out, like I told you, like who I was, but I did notice I started smelling things, spelling, think the way things smelled affected me differently, touch, because when you don't have your sight, you start depending on other senses. And so being able to hone in on those other things really helps me with my writing. I talk a lot about smells, touching, and, all of that. And so these are things that you can take for granted, and or at least I took for granted. But
I think most of us do.
but then once you lose your, certain sense. And like I said, I have my peripheral, but I don't have my central vision, which I mean, anything you look at, for me, it's gone. So the way that feel and the way that I see it, it allows me to be able to pour that into my art. And so I wrote a couple screenplays as well. I played around with some poetry, and I mean everything just started coming out of me. So
It was bottled up
it was just
bottled
in
up for
there.
a while.
I mean, And still, I'm just continuously coming up with new ideas, coming up with new stories. And I do voice to text,
Is that how you write your books? Through that?
mostly. Or I'll
Wow.
use, like I told you, I magnify like 800 on my big screen. I'm doing this because it's like huge. And so I'll have like big words. But in my beginning stages, I like to talk, you know, and then just let it type it out. And then I hear it back. In retrospect, I was always a listener when it came to, even when I told you I used to be in plays and in high school and in college, and I would learn my scripts through listening. I would record my voice and then I would listen to it. And so it all kind of makes sense now. It was all leading me to this one moment in which I was able to, get up off that floor
Really listen.
and then really hear and then, hear God and to, just be obedient to what he told me to do. And so my life mission now is to inspire others, because like I said, I just being on that floor, I don't want anyone to feel that. And I want people to know that it's never, ever too late. It's never too late. You can achieve whatever it is you put your mind to. I mean, who knew I would have been writing stories? I never, ever, if you would have said this to me, even though, like I told you, when I was a little girl, I used to do those things, but I had forgot. I mean, I didn't even remember that I had done all of that until I was just going through some of my old stuff. But if someone would have said, "You're going to be a writer," I'd be like, ha ha ha, that's funny. Even though my grandma, I remember asking my grandmother, she was a nurse, and I said, if there was anything that you could do, if it wasn't nursing, what would it be? And she was like, I would have been a writer. That's what my grandma said. I thought it was the cutest thing ever. But now I'm like, see, I just believe all these things that was happening, it's all spiritual, it was just going into my spirit.
Are you someone that believes that you had to hit that bathroom floor to find this new journey for you? Or do you think it would have been possible had you not reached the depths that you did?
That's a really good question. I don't know because all I can say is I was on that floor. So, and that was
Sometimes
the
we don't
only,
listen until we get to that place. Like sometimes we don't hear the things that we need to hear until we hit that bottom, if you
and
will.
I mean, a lot of times I've never heard anyone just say, "Oh, I was happy yesterday, and then today I'm on the floor." I mean, it's typically descent. That first you find yourself in the bed sleeping. You just find yourself just sitting on the couch first, and then it's just it happens in stages. And so for me to like you said, I went through all those stages. I mean, I can sit here and just remember the tiredness, the feeling that I had until I ended up on the floor, and there's nowhere lower than that other than death.
Looking back at those moments, does that make you celebrate where you are now even more
Oh,
so?
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, even if, and how do I say this? Prior to that, I never thought, and I hope this comes out properly, but I never thought that I would be a person that would end up on the floor, if that makes sense. Because I was like, "Oh, I done been through so much, like, my mom left when I was a little girl, I didn't have a dad, I da 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 da, like, I did that, been there, done that," and I was kinda, like, approaching life in this way to where I didn't think that I was capable of my mind getting to that point.
Turns out you're a human too, right?
There
I
you go.
mean,
That's it, that
we
part.
can't predict
You
anything, and
can't. You
you
can't.
know, and you have to kind of just move through, like you said, with like when you can, you find these silver linings in a moment. And even if it is, I showered today, like if you're in that space and it's like, I made a meal for the family today, like
Yes.
you celebrate the little things and
Celebrate those
eventually
moments.
we can pull ourselves out. It's
Absolutely.
kind of interesting. I talked the episode that came out today, the day that we're recording this, was a gentleman, Chad Foster, who at about in his 20s, he lost his vision completely.
Oh, yeah, I
And
saw that.
and
Mhm.
what he told me was that it was like this at the at his point in life now, it's like a gift that was presented to him in the ugliest wrapping paper that he's ever seen, because it opened his mind to things that he never even considered that he could do. And now that he didn't have that one thing that so many other people do have, he was able to achieve even more than if we would just assume that we should have it. Like you said, kind of just like we just take for granted these things. And now he's living out loud and like taught himself to ski and do all these things that I'm like, I don't even want to, like, I can't even imagine doing that. And so like I think we, until we hit these points, I mean, I wish we could learn before, but sometimes we have to hit these points where we're like, oh, this is the good part. Like these are the things. And even in my sense, like losing my mom, I wouldn't wish that on anyone,
Right.
a child or anything. But now that I look back, now that I'm in my 40s and I look back at that experience, it taught me so much. All the things that came from that made me the person that I am today. And so,
Right.
to
Right.
your point of finding that silver lining, finding the good in the bad things is something that we could all practice a little bit more, I think.
Yes. And I think that it helps. I love that you have this platform that because it allows people to see that I'm not the only one, right? Because when I was going through my vision, when I was losing my vision and when I woke up and could see, I felt that no one could relate to what I was going through. And so you mentioned, what's his name, Chad?
Chad Foster, yeah.
I watched it, and so I said, "Oh my god," because he went to Harvard. I mean, he did all these amazing things, and seeing that motivated me, right? A legally blind woman, and I'm seeing, this man talk about all these wonderful things that he's doing and the things that he's accomplished, and so it motivate. He's a public speaker, I'm like,
What can I
taking
do?
notes.
What else can I do?
You know
Right?
what I mean? I'm
Exactly.
taking notes. And that's what your platform did for me. So that's what the hope is, as we, have these conversations, and hopefully someone will be able to watch it, and even if they're not legally blind or whatever, like, haven't had my experience, well, if they feel themselves, like I'm saying, going to the floor, it's like you can stop yourself before you get there. And like you said, celebrate those small wins. And I'm gonna tell you what else. I got therapy.
It's a good thing. It's
I
helpful.
got professional help, once I got up, and I was like, okay, I can't do this alone. I need some help. And so, I do that with no shame. I talk about that all the time. I thank my therapist in my book. She got a special acknowledgement line because she said, "Are you okay?" And first I was like, "Yeah, I'm good." And then I was like, "No, I'm not."
That right there, that's the important step, I think, is when we can admit to ourselves that we're not okay. And
Right.
that's okay to
Right.
not be okay. Because again, we're human and life will hit you in all sorts of ways. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And so like it's okay to not be okay. And I love that you found therapy and you found someone that would listen to you unbiased. Not that our family around us,
Oh, absolutely.
they want to hear us, but they're not listening to us in the same way as like a therapist, a third party
Right.
might. And sometimes we
Absolutely.
just need to be able to say the thing and maybe we, skirt around the issue with the people we love because we don't want them to be worried about us.
Right.
But yeah, I'm glad that you brought up therapy. I think it's so important. And I think we're, in 2024, I think maybe people, it's not like a stigma, maybe as much as it used to seem like it. If you admitted
Right.
you were going to therapy, they were like, what's wrong with you? And you can go to therapy and nothing's wrong with you?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I love that helped you in that way. Tell me a little bit more about like your first book and how you got it to publishing.
Okay.
Like what does that journey look like for you
Oh
in
my
this new
goodness.
version of Terrace?
Yes. So, so as I said, I wrote, and I started writing. I was like, oh my God, I kind of got, I'm Googling. I'm going to YouTube University, and I'm doing all these things trying to teach myself. And so I'm like, I kind of came up with a little idea, and I'm like, okay, this feels right. So I start sending out my manuscript to different publishers, and this editor is like, you need a writing coach.
Mm.
I'm like, "Oh, what? Say what? Like, I can't get this published? Like, let's go," you know? It's just like, yeah, there are some key elements that you need in order to make a novel, you know? So I call this man, he's my Yoda, my literary Yoda. And so I hired a writing coach
That's
named Bruce
awesome.
McAllister. He's amazing. And so he basically he was a professor for 30 years. So even though he's a writing coach now, he was a teacher, you know, at heart. And so I was a fast learner and I was like soaking in all the information. And so he just took me to school, you know, just teaching me scene development, character development, and all the things. And so it took maybe about a good 90 days for me to revamp my whole manuscript. And he said, "Well, this looks good." Like you know, we couldn't believe it, right? And so he was like, "Let's just do a test and see what happens and see if you can get an agent." And so I sent it out and, you know, to six different agents. And then one of them I actually, you know, got. And within a year, I had my first like publishing deal. It's crazy. Yeah. And so that's
How
was
does that
my
make you
journey.
feel when you get that, like, yes, you get a publishing deal?
You know, I couldn't, I was able to sit in it, you know, and it was such a beautiful, beautiful moment for me.
Did that feel different than the other wins in your life?
Oh my goodness, you're asking the most wonderful questions. I would say yes, because once you've gone to that bottom place, and once you do something and realize that it's not about me, right? Because as I said, and I want to make sure I'm saying this right, but it's not going to be perfect. But, you know, I was chasing the money originally. And, you know, I had a career and as you can see, what happened was I still hit rock bottom, right? So it's like all the money and all the things that I had, it didn't even matter. So once I figured out and found something that gave me purpose where you know and I said even if someone doesn't buy Black Pearl, if I can help someone not get on the floor, if I can be, you know, the some or if I can or just someone hearing my voice or hearing my story can help them in some way, then I've done my job, right? So getting published was the icing on the cake because when God told me to write, I didn't know where it was going to lead me, right? I didn't know if it was just going to be, I'm just going to write just for fun. And even though he said write a book, you know, I didn't know exactly where it was going to take me.
That could
But
be
when I was,
anything.
right. So when I was telling, you know, friends and family, like what my book was about, they was like, that sounds like a movie. And actually, I did get a movie deal, but I turned it down. That's a whole nother story. But yeah, like everything was just right. It just felt right. And it definitely was just a beautiful moment and more so just about that I was doing something that I was meant to do, you know, and and realizing, like I said, it's not just for me and it's not just about me. You know, I start thinking in terms of legacy and, you know, it's like no one can take this from me. Like I have a published novel, right? And I have another one that's coming out in January. Yeah. And so it's just opened the doors and just being true to who, you know, I'm in this space in this place where I'm being true to who I am, you know, no matter with the imperfections. You know, I talk a lot about that. No more mask, you know, taking the mask off.
Yeah, living out loud.
Yep, because that's what I was doing for a while. You know, I was just like, oh, I'm good, everything's good, you know, when it
But to be
was
fair, I think a lot of us were taught, like, society taught us to be that way. So I don't think it was just you. Like, I think we're all just
right,
like, you don't show your flaws and you don't show the broken parts. And like,
right.
I'm sure you understand this now. Those things are what make us interesting.
Oh my
Those are the
God,
things that make us connect. Like,
correct.
I can't relate to someone that just got this crazy promotion or some crazy award, but I sure can relate to when they're feeling like really crappy. And like we can talk that through. And now we both feel like humans together versus, you know, the celebrations that I think growing up, I was always taught like, you just got to get the next promotion. You just need to buy the bigger house. You just need to get a better car, you know, like,
Yes,
and now it's like you publishing, getting a publishing deal, getting a book published, that didn't exist. Like
right,
that book didn't exist. Like you
mm,
created that from nothing.
right,
Whereas in your former life, you were just getting the next job that someone else decided what that job looked like. And maybe you made it your own, but you were still kind of following some kind of formula. This started with a blank page,
Oh,
and you
yeah.
created something that now you can celebrate and sit in and be like, I mean, it's kind of like, I guess, like having a kid, right? Like you created that.
Right.
So I
Absolutely.
can
It's my
see why
baby.
how that would be just like so fulfilling in this like indescribable way.
Right. And it was like, you know what? And I don't like to recognize the negativity, right? You know how people like, tell the haters, blah, blah, blah. I don't really like to do that. But like, I don't even like to give it energy. But I will say that, I did have a moment. It's like, I remember when I was told that I couldn't even work in the mailroom.
Mm.
you know,
Hey, but that's funny because you also said but you listened to I don't wouldn't call them haters, but you listened to someone that was like, "You need a writing coach." Like that could be seen in your previous world, like you're not good enough, right? But you
mm,
took it as, "No, you're right. I could use this."
right.
Like so there's a flip in the way you described your former life and the things that you were doing and how you approached that. So even that, you like gave it air and it helped you. So I
Very
mean,
true. Very true.
there's that element to that. I mean, congratulations on
Thank
first
you.
book, but also congratulations on upcoming book. That's so
Thank you.
cool.
Thank you so
Is
much.
that are you just going to keep like banging them out? Like what's happening?
Yeah. Yeah, so Black Pearl is my first one and I'm coming up on the 1 year anniversary, and then I have the Empress Creed that's coming out in January. And then that following November, I have one called Black Juliet that's coming out. And it's
Guess that's what
BLK
happens when
TV.
you write every day.
Yeah. Right. You just turn I told you I just couldn't stop. I started writing, and one of the things I know I will say that I had to learn also is I went too far on that end, because when I was writing every day, I wasn't sleeping, so I started going too far over because I was like, oh, I got to get it done. I got to get, because to be honest, for a minute, I was scared that I was going to lose it, right? Because I was like, where is this even coming from? Like all of this, like ideas, and, it was like a
That makes
new
sense.
space and place for me. And I truly was scared that I was going to maybe lose it. I was like, well, what if it goes away? So I was just like, wasn't sleeping. And I'm walking around like a zombie, wasn't getting any sleep. And so I had to then, find a balance and be able to be present, for my kids and my husband, and, making sure that I have work hours and, do all the things and treat it, like a career, like a job, right? But still, now don't get me wrong, you know, there may be times when, like I'm working on this new baby, and it's a little Western. And so, if she starts like talking to me in my sleep, I have to get up and just, write down what she's saying real quick, and then I'll get back in the bed. So that does happen. That is part of the, because I want things to happen, naturally, but also I hope I'm making sense. Just finding that balance, making sure I'm not going too far to where I'm depriving myself of, sleep and all the things that you need in order to make sure you stay healthy.
Yeah, that's important.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you won't be able to write any more books if you're not healthy. So
Oh my goodness.
you need to find that balance. Do your kids or your husband say anything about who you are now compared to who you were before? Did they notice a difference? Are you different?
Mm.
Like, are you
You
more
know,
joyful because you're kind of living in this space, or
yeah. You know what? We
are they
have
just
not.
like your mom?
I thought I was gonna try to separate it, but yeah, like with my kids, I just feel like, I'm mom. I I hit a lot, so they didn't really like they know now. I mean, because they hear me talking, they've seen some of my podcasts. They're like, "Mommy, we didn't know you were on the floor." Like, So then I try to be open with them and say, "Mom," like just like I talk to you, but I make it age appropriate. But I say, mommy wasn't feeling well, and so now I make sure that if I'm tired or if something's going on, I don't just say, "Oh, I'm good, I'm good, I'm good." It's like, "Mommy, take a nap."
You're teaching them. I mean, they're
Yes,
seeing that, and that's
yes.
going to be great for them as adults.
Yes, I'm telling you, I, so, and that's again, taking that mask off in all forms. And, my husband reads my work and he's supportive.
Does he tell you when it's not good? Is it
Oh,
ever
my
not
work is
good?
good.
I knew you were gonna say that. Somehow I knew that.
No, 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 no. No, I'm my worst critic. And, to be honest, I don't really give him like I don't
You're
tell
just
him
like,
until.
"Read it. Don't tell me what to say about it."
No, 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 no. No,
Oh,
I
okay.
take his feedback, but it's like I usually wait until I'm at a good space and place to be able to like when I know that I'm already done it, because it's like I can kind of feel it where, it's like, "Ooh, this feels good," So then that's usually when I share because I am the only child, right? So sometimes I like my me time. And so, I get kind of like in this little beautiful space and place where, I create. And not all those ideas are good. And I know that, right? But it's just fun to just play around, and just see because sometimes something beautiful may come out of it. So I don't always share all those little things with him until it gets to the point where I feel comfortable to get like feedback where it's like, what do you think about this versus that, especially if I write from a male perspective. So I'm
That's
like,
helpful, yeah.
you know, so
Sounds like you know what you're doing.
I'm trying.
I
I'm
love to
learning
kind
as
of
I go.
hey, I love to kind of wrap these conversations up with a question, and I'm wondering if you could go back to the Terrace that woke up that day and couldn't see the text messages on her phone, and this version of you, what would you wanna say to her about this journey that she was about to go on?
If I could go back and talk to myself, is that what you're
Yeah,
asking?
like, if you could talk to you, knowing what you know now on this journey that you found this joy again,
Yes.
and that Terrace that woke up that morning and looked at her phone and didn't see the things she was expecting to see on that phone.
I
What would you
would
wanna say?
I would tell her to be true to herself, put faith over fear, and it will be okay.
Just believe in yourself,
It will be
trust it.
okay.
Mm,
Faith, you know, don't be scared, you know. Faith, make sure you keep your faith intact. Take and just be true to who you are. I think I would definitely. And then it's okay. I think a lot of times when we're going through things, just hearing that you're okay is important because a lot of times that's the part that's the kicker because you don't feel like you're going to be okay. You're like, it's so painful. It's like, I'm not, it's like, yeah, you may not feel it in this moment, but you're going to be okay. Like the sun is going to come up tomorrow, right? So you
she'd probably be
truly.
like, "You did what? You wrote a book? You wrote 2 books? You wrote a
Oh,
3rd book?"
oh my goodness. Like I can't even when you said go back, I just felt when I looked at that phone, it just took me back to truly like I could remember what that feeling lost and just feeling like, what am I going to do? And that, I just remember just feeling all over the place. But, just knowing that, you're going to be all right and to, do not be scared. And that is that, my anxiety goes up all the time. But it's like, making sure I just keep my faith first and just know that, God got you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look where you are. Look, you did it, and
Yeah.
you're still doing
Yeah.
it. And who knows what the next 10 years are going to bring in this journey that you're creating for yourself now. And you trust yourself. So I think it's,
Absolutely. Oh, I love that. Trust yourself. That is so major, and it's so hard, because you start thinking about, well, I got this due and that due and all these bills, but, God had me and in more ways than one because, I was able to hear his voice. Thank God. Thank you,
mm,
God. I was able to, I was able to hear his voice because, sometimes, like you said, people don't get to even hear that. So I was able to actually hear that and
and listen.
do something. And yes, and I made a commitment. And that's why I'm like, no matter what platform I'm on, I make sure I tell my story and, and make sure that, I give God the glory. And also that I want people to know, that, it's never too late.
I mean, give yourself some of that credit too. I think, you've done the work. You've done a lot.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so if people want to like kind of get in your orbit, they want to learn more about your books or connect with you, what's the best way to find you?
Okay. You can find me on social media at Taris Marie. That's on Facebook and Instagram. You can go to my website at www.tarrismarie.com, or you can go to blackodyssey.net. That's where you can see all my books that are going to be coming out as well. So, any of those platforms, you should be able to find me.
We'll definitely put those links in the show notes so people can easily find you and connect with you and read your books and order your books and do all the things and
Thank
connect with
you.
you, or even reach out and tell you that you made a difference and
Oh
what
my
you
God.
said connected with them and made them feel less alone, because I'm sure that someone listening right now is feeling that way. And so if you are, I'm sure Terrace would love to hear from you
Yes,
and
please.
hear that. So thank you for allowing me to hold this space and have these questions for you and for you to answer them. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful questions and thank you for having me. I truly appreciate you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for listening. If something that Tara said resonated with you, or you think someone in your life needs to hear this story, please share this episode with them. We would love that. And I will say goodbye for now. I will be back next week with a brand new episode of the Life Shift podcast. Thanks again, Terrace.
Thank you.
For more information, please visit www.thelifeshiftpodcast.com. Hey everyone. I hope you are having a wonderful day so far. I am just dropping this special little clip into all the episodes. So, no matter what episode you're listening to, this is actually pretty current as of July 2024. I wanted to come on here and just say a big thank you to Earworthy, because the Life Shift podcast was just named the best overall podcast of the year in the first Earworthy Independent Podcast Awards. And you've probably seen some articles written about the Life Shift podcast before, written by Earworthy. And now he is launching, from his online publication, he is launching these yearly winners of independent podcast awards. And these are specifically for indie podcasters. We are those that wear all the hats. We create the show. Some people write the show. We're producers, sound engineers. We troubleshoot all the tech. We do any kind of research if we need to. We host the shows. We distribute the shows. We do all the things that relate to our shows because we love it. And it's so nice to see my name in a list with some other amazing podcasts like Multispective, which won Best Life Lessons Podcast. Salad with a Side of Fries won Best Health Podcast. Bippity Boppity Business won Best Business Advice Podcast. And there are so many more. And so I just want to come on here and say thank you to Earworthy for not only doing these awards every year and just honoring some of us indie podcasters that sometimes feel like we're just shouting into the void, but we're not. We're just doing what brings us joy, and hopefully through that work it brings other people joy. In my case, for the Life Shift, I hope that each episode finds the ears that needed to hear it the most so that they feel a little less alone in their circumstance. But also, Earworthy writes all these amazing publications pretty much weekly, every week, every weekday, I should say, where he writes on Blogger, Medium, Substack, Tumblr, Vocal, Many Stories, and for other places. And he really just highlights the independent podcasters. So thank you, Frank, for everything you do with Earworthy and for recognizing all of us in the first Earworthy Independent Podcast Awards. If you'd like to read more, please head to medium.com/EAR hyphen WORTHY. Thanks again and enjoy this episode.